Welcome to Shift Church. If this is your first time here, we would love it if you would scan this QR code. And if you fill out that Connects card, we'll send you some free Opus coffee. And make sure that you check out the Coffee with Joe option so that you can enjoy that cup of Joe with Joe. And you can ask any and all questions that you want or need to know. It would be a great time. It's official. Shift students are meeting at Defy on July 22nd at 2 p.m. The cost is $20 per person to jump. Anyone middle to high school can come and jump and hang out. If you're older than that, sorry, you don't get to have any fun. You can register on our Facebook virtual campus group. 1946, the movie, has hit the road on tour through the southern United States, and they're going to be in Jacksonville on August 14th. Tickets are free, but donations are always welcome. Not only are you going to be able to watch the film in person, but there's going to be a Q&A afterwards with film creator Sharon, Rocky, Ruggio, and others. If you'd like to attend, then you can scan this code or the one in the back, scroll down, and reserve your tickets. It's that easy. And now it's time for our new series, American Jesus.
Welcome, everybody. If you're the praying type, we've got lots of people that are traveling to places, traveling back from places, and still in places. So just be remembering them. And I do want to say, for those that know John and Emily Bringegardner, she's home but having difficulty, and he posted on Facebook about it. So I'm not saying anything he hasn't already said publicly. So just be praying for them. We're going to be setting up a meal train for them. Emily, she fell and broke her hip and having some trouble at home. So they've hired like in-home help. So just really praying that like those things really help her get back up on her feet, doing the things that she loves to do. So be watching for that. That'll be in our virtual campus, and you can help out with that. If you are new in person or online, my name is Joe. I'm the lead pastor here. And can you go back to the graphic? Check out that baby. So oh, that's stupid. It just is what it is. Who cares? It's supposed to be like angelic music behind it. That's fine. So we won that. Not that winning an award is a big deal in and of itself, but I thought Tamara kind of said it perfectly. It's not a big deal for the sake of winning a title, but a big deal for the sake of letting people know that there's a place in town that welcomes the least of these for real. As a person who's searched for this place for years, I can promise you it's a really damn big deal. And I love that. So we're the favorite place. We're number one. So take that, evangelicals. I'm kidding. Yeah. You can go ahead and go to the American Jesus. We're in a series titled American Jesus, and we've called it that because we are looking at the lies told to us by the American Jesus, and then looking at what Jesus actually said or did. In week 1, we looked at John 15, where Jesus uses the metaphor of a vine and branches, showing us the eternal presence that is always there and within us, and showing us that this idea of being cut off isn't about hell, is about those that are refusing to observe and check their egos, and only those that are unwilling to do that internal work of bringing their ego to life will be, quote unquote, cut off, simply because they refuse to do that. But for those willing, that divine connection is always there, and we recognize that it's what feeds us everything that we need. In week 2, last week, we looked at the idea of hope, and hope that grows from that presence and calls us to partner with that eternal presence to make things better. In John 16, Jesus is telling his disciples that he's going to die, that they're going to betray him. It's a pretty doom and gloom kind of chapter, until that final verse where Jesus says to take heart, or to have hope, because he's overcome the systems which are the order, the systems of our world. It's not people, it's not the things that you enjoy, it's how we've situated our world that harms others. And hope isn't some naive feeling that everything is just going to get better. A hope drives us to do something about it. So presence leads to hope, and hope leads to healing. And now, can you go back to the slide with the music? Thank you. So if you're comfortable, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and to take a few deep cleansing breaths. in through the nose and out through the mouth. Fill your lungs from the bottom to the top. Inhale, exhale. And as you do so, allow your body to relax and just allow your mind to go where it needs to. Let me encourage you to gently lay down whatever came before this and to keep whatever is coming next for then. And just focus on right now. What do you need from this gathering? And what do you need from me? Set your intentions for this day right now. And as we go through this, take note of the things that really stand out or resonate with you. Continue to breathe, and as things come to the surface, meet them with love and curiosity rather than judgment. As you begin to come back to the room, continue to breathe in deeply. Take a few deeper diaphragm breaths. And when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes. This has been, for us personally, a rough week. And I would say probably for most people, just kind of collectively, we get to live in a time where our country is just incredibly polarized, and it has just. I was hoping that maybe we would be at least a little introspective as a nation, but yet what it seems like is just a further deepening of that polarization this past week. And instead of the tone being brought down, it kind of seems like it's either gone back to where it has, or maybe cranked up a little bit more. And I hate talking about politics in this setting, even though it's brought up a lot. It's not my favorite, but it is how we order our lives, right? Like it just is. And regardless of how we feel about politics personally, it affects everyone in this room and online, because your lives, our lives, are going to be directly impacted by the people that govern our nation and write our laws. And when people that are governing, the ones that do that, they stand on national platforms to personally, purposely erase and marginalize people while invoking the name of God, that's just going to create more violence. And that's not an us versus them scenario. So like, that's not a scare tactic of somebody standing in a place like this for people sitting in places like you. That's not a scare tactic to get you to attend more or to give your money here, right? Like this is just what we do as a nation, and it's where we are as a nation. And as a nation, as a people, what we do better than almost anything is deflect and scapegoat. We're really good at that. And that is the way of American Jesus. So this week, we saw all the same old, right? There's like no serious changing to anything. And it's just a reflection of who we are as a people. And I don't know that there will be any healing, because healing doesn't just happen. And just like presence, just like hope, it takes time and it takes intention. It takes intention because we have to be honest about our wounds. We have to be honest about those things, and we have to be honest about how to transform those wounds. Because if we don't transform them, we will transmit them. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Richard Rohr, and it says this: all great spirituality is what we do with our pain. We either transform it or we transmit it. All great, hear that again, all great spirituality is what we do with our pain. We either transform it or transmit it. That's from his book, Falling Upward, if anybody would like to know. Excellent book. It's a yearly read for me. In Luke's account of Jesus's life, chapter 19, we see Jesus coming into a town called Jericho. And in that town is a man named Zacchaeus. And I'm pretty sure all of us are at least familiar with this story. We've talked about it before here. But Zacchaeus was a traitor to his people. He was a tax collector. He worked for the occupying authoritarian Roman Empire. Tax collectors were the ones that they were typically people that lived there. They were Jewish people, and they would collect the taxes owed from the Jewish people to the occupying force, right? And so that was their job. The real problem came into the fact that they were also allowed to take off the top. So if you owed this amount of money, the tax collectors say, okay, you owe this, but plus this. And that plus this was theirs to keep. So not only had he betrayed, his people through all of this, he was stealing from them. So he was absolutely hated, right? To say he was despised would be an understatement. So Jesus comes into town and he walks right up to the most hated man in that town and invites himself over for dinner. And it infuriates, that's how you say it. It makes everybody really angry, right? And it says in the Greek, it says that they began to murmur. And I imagine it going something like this.
What are they saying?
They're just saying murmur, murmur, murmur.
I mean, it's just sort of a general murmur.
Murmur.
Huh. You may murmur all you like.
That is from the Steve Martin classic, The Man with Two Brains. And the moment I read that passage where it says that they murmur, that's exactly where my brain went. So I literally had to do that or I couldn't have moved forward. Great movie, by the way. Does anybody know that movie, The Man with Two Brains? Oh, Alan, I thought you would. Anyway, it's okay. It's okay. No, it's fine. It's fine. It just shows all the work I have to do. Anyway, so Zacchaeus invites all of his outcast friends. They throw this huge party. Jesus comes over. There is no conversation recorded, but something internal is happening with Zacchaeus. He's confronting his ego and the pain that he's been transmitting, right? He's been stealing from all of his neighbors, breaking a very fundamental rule of life. Treat others as you want to be treated. And that truth is shared by almost all of the world's major religions because it is so fundamental to what it means to be human. And Zacchaeus was breaking that because he was transmitting his pain. And the more he hurt, the more he stole. The text doesn't say that, okay? The text doesn't say that, but that's just human nature. And we see it today. Billionaires hoarding wealth instead of helping others as they embark on these like juvenile ego trips, create pet projects, buying up bigger and bigger toys to cover over whatever it is that they're lacking. And the hoarding is causing a collapse of the middle class and creates a plantation capitalism that grows on the backs of the poor. Now, I don't know if the author of Luke meant to create an archetype, but Zacchaeus is the billionaire archetype. Look at what Zacchaeus says to Jesus as he goes from transmitting to transforming in verse 8. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham. And we hear salvation and we think heaven, but in the Greek, the word is soteria. And before it means anything, it means liberation. And this story is a microcosm of healing. And for us, for most of us, it will not happen this fast, right? But because Zacchaeus finally felt safe enough to observe his ego, he transforms that pain and freedom comes to him, but not only to him. Because whatever wounds he was carrying were healed and then became sacred wounds. Like the wounds of Christ that bring healing, our wounds can do the same for others if only we transform them. That healing, that freedom, that transformation impacted everyone that his pain also impacted. So our transformation doesn't just heal us, doesn't just bring liberation to us. It brings healing and liberation to all those around us. When we confront our egos, when we confront our pain and begin the transformation toward healing, liberation comes to all of us and those that are all around us, because just like that vine and branches metaphor from last week, we're all connected. Transforming your pain isn't easy or fast. And while like this story of Zacchaeus A few people might have transformations like that. I think for most of us, it's going to take much longer. It's going to be much harder. That introspection that it takes is going to be incredibly difficult, which is why so many of us, so many never reach that stage and then just continue to transmit. And a really good example of that is also found in Luke's gospel. It's in Luke 4. We see Jesus showing up to his hometown. He's in the synagogue. He's getting ready to do the reading. He's handed a scroll, the book of Isaiah, and he reads this section: "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he's anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And everyone's excited because this is what they've been waiting for. Everybody in the synagogue is exciting because they've been waiting for this inbreaking of God's Spirit to set up this new kingdom, right? One where Israel is going to rule over their enemies. This nationalist belief is the same belief behind the American Jesus of today, using force and might to mandate a theocracy. Same thing we're seeing today, same exact thing. And then Jesus confronts this egocentric belief by telling two stories where God shows up in the lives of people outside of the boundaries that they've set. A widow who is not a Jewish woman, and another person who is actually a general in an army that is an enemy of the Israelite people. So he tells these stories, and in verse 28, it says this: "When they heard this, all in the synagogue were filled with rage." They were filled with this passionate anger. And one of the pictures this word paints is this: an inflaming wine that either drives the drinker mad or kills the drinker with its strength. They just straight up lost their mind, right? They just lost their mind. But why would they respond with such violence? Because the next thing they try to do is throw them off a cliff. So why would they respond with such violence? Because Jesus challenged their ego by taking down a group identifier. And that group identifier for them was being who was in and who was out. And when someone or something challenges a group identifier, it challenges who people are, or at least who they think they are. It challenges their belonging. It challenges who they believe God to be. And because who I believe God to be is so intertwined with who I believe I am, to question one is to question both. To challenge one is to challenge both. It is the reason that people respond to me or to us with such vitriol. It's why the horrible comments that we get or the messages that we get. If I preach a God of love and not one of wrath, it challenges their belonging. It challenges their identity in the same way. American Jesus wants that egocentric us versus them, right? Wants us to create that boundary of who's in and who's out, knowing that we're always in the in category. And yet here, Jesus confronts their assumed position within this new kingdom of God as in, and those people as out. And he communicates to them, he tells them, if they're not careful, they're going to completely miss what God is doing. Now, they could respond in one of two ways. They could reflect, right? They could reflect on what Jesus just said, what he's told them, change how they see God and how they interact with their fellow humans, which is hard, which is the hard work of the ego, right? Of letting go. Or they could circle the wagons, just ignore what Jesus said and double down. And that's exactly what they do. Now, we shouldn't judge them too harshly because we do the exact same thing. Because someone says or does something that challenges who we are or who we believe God to be, like for most of us, our sympathetic nerve system kicks in, right? And that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response happens. And you can feel that with your adrenaline kind of spiking, and your face will start to flush. Your body will literally respond to that, right? And it takes over, and we respond out of that trigger outside of our rational mind, right? Unless we learn to step back from that initial anger, that passionate whine that drives us mad or kills us, right? And regulate our nervous systems. Unless we're able to see past the ego defending itself, we'll never see the human right in front of us. So the crowd takes him to a cliff, tries to murder him. It's the same mob violence that we see today. And the mob is always demonic. It's the same mob violence we see today when somebody challenges that group identifier or challenges the object at the center of that identity. It's what transmitting pain looks like. This is a perfect example of what transmitting pain looks like. Rather than transforming and creating sacred wounds that heal, transmitting pain just creates more wounds that then wound more people. Instead of birthing sacred scars, it only births more scars. It's just easier to storm capitals. It's easier to drop bombs. It's easier to shoot guns. It's easier to ostracize and marginalize. It's easier to name call and to shame. It's easier to scream heretic. It's easier to peddle conspiracy theories. It's literally easier to do almost anything than the work of transforming pain, which is why so many transmit it. Confession time. If you were here during our time at the building, or if you were online during that time period, you can look back and you can hear me transmitting my pain in the teachings. Like at the time, of course, I didn't realize that's what I was doing, right? And I wasn't doing it with any ill will to anyone, but if I'm honest, except the American Evangelical Church. Like I was angry and I lashed out at the thing that hurt me, right? And I think it's just part of human nature. I think for the most part, when we do that, it is part of the healing process. I do also think, though, that it can become dangerous and harmful if we refuse to move past it. And I think what I'm getting ready to say is going to be an unpopular opinion, but that's never stopped me before. But so many within the deconstruction spaces, especially for those that are on social media, refuse to move past that pain. They refuse to do the work it takes to heal those wounds. And I am not assigning blame because it's hard. Confronting those wounds can take us back into some dark places. And I don't blame anyone that doesn't have the emotional capacity to do so. This is not victim shaming in any way, so please don't hear that. The fault lies entirely with the institution and the predatory church leaders it protects. And yet, if we're not careful, if we don't learn to do that hard work, if we don't confront those things, if we don't begin our healing, the temptation is to join the mob and trying to toss Jesus over the cliff. And then there's everybody else, right? Like, what about all of those around us? Like, we talked about what it looks like to transmit the pain, to transform the pain, but what about all of those people that are around us, right? Because the idea of us just being able to be wounded and go straight into transforming isn't feasible, right? It's not realistic. And if people claim that, if they're claiming to do that, or they're trying to teach you to do that, they're spiritually bypassing ingrained processes. And to do that is to our own detriment. So what about all of those people around us that we wound out of our own woundedness? And let's be honest, for most of us, and most of the time, unknowingly, right? Like unwittingly, but maybe sometimes intentionally. So on the last night of Jesus' life here on this earth, we find him in a garden called Gethsemane. And there he's praying before his eventual arrest, trial, and execution. One of his disciples, Judas, has agreed to betray him, and the signal for arrest is a kiss on the cheek. So Judas leads this group of soldiers, and after he kisses Jesus on the cheek, one of the soldiers grabs Jesus, and we see this in Matthew's account, chapter 26, 51 and 52. And it says, with that, one of Jesus's companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Put your sword back in its place, Jesus said to him, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. And John's account says that it was Peter who tried to kill the centurion. Peter, in all of his bravado, all of his ego, lashes out, tries to kill the man that grabs Jesus. And how does Jesus respond to this? According to Luke's account, Luke 22, it says this, but Jesus answered, no more of this. And he touched the man's ear and healed him. He healed him. And I know that there will be differing opinions on the healings of Jesus. Are they literal healings or metaphors of something? And to me, it just doesn't matter, because what I think about God is not the most important thing about God. So for me, the truth of the story is far deeper than what we perceive as literal. So hear me when I say this. Jesus heals those wounded by wayward disciples. Jesus heals those by wayward disciples. I have to believe that the Spirit still heals those that are wounded by people claiming to follow Jesus, but harm others in pursuit of that claim, which I think is the deepest truth of this story. Yes, it's amazing that Jesus could do that. And yes, it's amazing that Jesus would do that. But what's even more amazing is that Jesus still does that. And I have to believe that, because why else are you here? Why are you here in person or online? For most of us sitting in this space or watching this, you have no good reason to walk back into a church space. No good reason that you would stream a church teaching. By all rights and purposes, you had every reason to never come back or to never give it a chance. The wounds that you received were so deep that parts of you were cut off. And yet here you are. I have to believe that Jesus still touches those open wounds made by those committing violence in his name and heals them. And this is not an excuse to those who wield scripture or religion like a sword. There's no excuse for any kind of violence in the name of Jesus. And yet we can still recognize that the Spirit still moves, still heals, still creates transformation, even from those types of wounds. And not so that we just get rid of our pain, but so that we can exist within that purgatory where our private pain is no longer the center stage, but instead that it stands in solidarity with every drop of bloodshed, with every tear ever cried, every scream of anguish since the dawn of time. And this is part of the deep mystery of the passion of the Christ. Our pain is not our own. And I recognize that that is way easier said than done, right? Like, it's easy to sit here and talk about it, but the work is so much harder. And any kind of just flippant guide that I give you could threaten to diminish the work that we have to do, that we're all involved with. However, not offering any kind of way forward can create more harm than good. So knowing all of that, and in keeping what's turned into this theme for this series, I would like to give you 4 simple things to help you in that work. And this list is not comprehensive. It's not meant to be comprehensive, and it's not meant to be received as mental health care. Okay. You'll also notice that some of them repeat, and I encourage you not to dismiss that, but recognize and understand that there are deeper levels as we move forward in each step. So the first one is embrace community support. Learning to lean on a faith community for emotional and spiritual support when we carry one another's burdens, right? When we honestly do that for one another, it creates belonging, combats isolation. If nothing else occurs, This is a sacred act of holiness that we can give to one another. Number two, we've mentioned this one every week, practice mindfulness and prayer. We've mentioned this every week because this is so vital to the work of our undoing and remaking. Carving out time in your schedule for contemplative prayer, meditation, breathing exercises, talking. He's not here this week, but Kane, who leads guided meditations, it's going to look different for different people, right? So explore, experiment, find what works for you and allow that to transform your suffering into a pathway for spiritual and personal growth. 3, serve others. We said this before too. I will say this, I don't believe everything happens for a reason. I absolutely do not believe that everything happens for a reason. I believe God can bring reason to everything that happens. But that's when we decide to partner with that eternal presence to do so. And part of that is channeling our pain into positive pathways. If we allow our pain to guide us into helping others that struggle with the same pain, then we're going to be a part of their healing, right? Through empathy, through connection. Serving others is a reflection of this love that we're participating in, right? Of this Christ love. And then you get to see it impacting our community in positive ways. My last one is this, seek professional help. There are just things that are beyond our capability. But that doesn't mean that you don't have enough faith. That doesn't mean that you haven't prayed enough. Miss me with that. I just almost said bad words. But there are things that are just beyond our ability to handle alone and even collectively. Utilize the wisdom and skill of mental health professionals. Like therapy is going to be the thing that gives you the tools needed for managing that pain, for working through trauma, and then being able to foster resilience. Like there's nothing wrong with integrating professional help with those spiritual practices because those things lead to holistic healing and transformation. And if you need help with that, please reach out. We have a good relationship with a counseling center here in town, Gainesville Community Counseling Center, and we will connect you with Larry Green. Listen, this is a journey, right? This is a journey. It is a marathon and it's not a sprint. This is something that we will be doing the rest of our lives. And it's one that we all have to take, that we must take to find healing and transformation, right? It's not going to be easy. Probably will never end, but we keep pushing forward, keep pushing through, keep moving, even if it's just one step at a time, one breath at a time. One day you'll look up and you'll see that you're in a completely different place. And if no one else has told you this, then let me say it, that I am proud of you and how far you've come. I'm proud of us and how far we've come. And I'm thankful for this place. I am thankful, just personally, I'm thankful that I don't have to hide my pain here. We've been in churches where I had to qualify my pain because people would say things. And I'm thankful for all of you that are here and online, those that couldn't be here today, that allow us to just be human. So I'm thankful for this place. I'm thankful for you. And I'm thankful for that eternal presence, that Christ presence in the middle of it all, in the middle of all of it. Because presence leads to hope. Hope leads to healing. And healing leads to love. But we'll talk more about that next week. If you're new with us, in person or online, we end each gathering with a time of observation and reflection. And we do that to allow you the time to listen to your body and to listen to spirit. So the band, they're going to come back up and they're going to play so it's not an awkward silence. We'll turn down the lights to help create a little bit of intimacy. And I will ask a few questions to guide that process. And then I'll pray, and for any that are willing and wanting to, we will gather around the symbolic table of communion, which are those little cups in your seats. And each week we reflect on what we've heard and learned. And so today, let it remind us of the transformative work of Christ that still heals those cut off pieces. So just like we began our gathering, I invite you to close your eyes and take a few deep breaths. Allow yourself to feel what you need to feel. What is it that you needed from me today? From this gathering? What intention did you set? Did those things come to you? If so, what are they saying? If not, what is that saying? Are you able to see where you transmit your pain to others? And what is holding you back from transforming that pain? In what areas of your life do you need to allow healing to come to? And can you name those areas? My last question, what steps do you need to take? For some, it will be one of the 4 that we listed. For others, it will be learning to trust God again or trusting for the first time. Let me encourage you to not do this alone. Please reach out if it's helpful, and we can help make those steps easier. Let's pray. Healer of cut off pieces, thank you for your ongoing work of restoring us. I can't speak for everyone else, but thank you for the path that you walked with me on. I ask that you guide all of us on our own paths to transformation, whatever that looks like. May we be bold to see ourselves like Zacchaeus, realize when we're being the mob, and humble enough to know when we're wielding a sword. I pray we're able to see where we still transmit our pain, and that we hold space for each other as we try to figure that out. As we continue on this contemplative path, lead others to us that need this healing or can help in the healing. Forgive us for those things done and for those things left undone. Give us eyes to see and ears to hear. Bring comfort to the afflicted, healing to the broken, and freedom to the chained. In your name, amen.